Welcome to How Meets History. Today, we're digging into what really happens to waste in landfills and the surprising science behind where our trash goes after it disappears from the curb.
Today, we're tackling a big question. What really happens in a landfill?
You know the drill, right? It's a daily ritual for pretty much all of us. You toss something in the bin, the truck comes, and poof, it's just gone.
But have you ever really stopped to think about where away actually is? I mean, there's no magical place called away. Every single thing we throw out has to end up somewhere. So the real question is, what happens after that truck turns the corner?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into. Welcome to the surprisingly complex and honestly fascinating world of the modern landfill.
Get ready for this number. In the U.S. alone, we're talking about 146 million tons of waste going into landfills every single year. To try and wrap your head around that, that's like taking about 400 Empire State Buildings and just burying them. It's a staggering amount of stuff, and managing it has forced us to get really, really smart.
Okay, so before we get to the high-tech stuff, we need to look back. Because our relationship with trash, well, for most of history, it was a pretty messy and frankly dangerous affair. We've come a long, long way.
And what's kind of wild is how long it took us to get our act together. I mean, the first recorded landfill goes all the way back to ancient Crete, 3000 BC. But for thousands of years, not much changed. It wasn't until the 1890s, when U.S. cities were literally overflowing with garbage, that we even admitted we had a garbage problem. We saw the first sanitary landfills in the 30s, which was an improvement, but the real revolution didn't happen until 1976. That's when the government finally stepped in and banned those old hazardous open dumps for good. And the difference between then and now? It's like night and day. Seriously. The old open dumps were exactly what you're imagining. These giant, unregulated pits, they were breeding grounds for pests and disease, they'd catch on fire, and all sorts of nasty stuff would just leak right into the groundwater. Today's sanitary landfills, they're the polar opposite. They are highly controlled, carefully engineered systems built for one purpose, to keep all that stuff contained.
All right, so let's pop the hood and look at the engineering, because this is where it gets really cool. The whole idea behind a modern landfill isn't to just dump trash. The goal is to isolate it, to seal it off from the outside world completely. Think of it less like a dump and more like a carefully constructed dry tomb.
And the foundation of this entire tomb is the liner system. This is probably the most critical part. The best way to picture it is like building a massive, super secure bathtub underground. You start with a layer of really dense, compacted clay. Then, on top of that, you roll out this super thick, durable plastic liner. The whole point is to create this impermeable barrier to make absolutely sure nothing gets out.
So why go to all the trouble of building this giant bathtub? Well, it's to contain one thing: leachate. Yep, that's the technical term for garbage juice. It's what you get when rainwater filters down through all that trash, picking up all sorts of nasty chemicals and contaminants along the way. This stuff is basically a toxic soup, and it is the #1 threat to our groundwater. You have to keep it contained.
Okay, so this really shows you how the whole system works together. See at the bottom? That's the liner we just talked about. The trash gets packed into these dense little blocks called cells. And see those pipes running along the bottom? That's the leachate collection system. It's basically the drain in our bathtub. It sucks all that garbage juice out so it can be treated. Then you've got other pipes to handle the gas that builds up. And when a section is full, they cap it off with another layer. It's a totally sealed system.
And here's something you might not realize. The work doesn't stop when the landfill is full. Not even close. By law, these sites have to be monitored for at least 30 years after they close. That means constantly checking the groundwater for leaks, making sure the gas system is working, and maintaining that final cap. It is a massive, long-term commitment.
So we've sealed our trash away in this high-tech tomb, but what's actually going on inside? You might think it's just sitting there, but you'd be wrong. There's a whole secret life unfolding underground, a slow, invisible, but incredibly powerful process. Deep inside that packed-down waste, a tiny army of bacteria is going to work. It happens in stages. First, aerobic bacteria, the kind that need oxygen, burn through whatever air is trapped in there. Once the oxygen's gone, a whole different crew of anaerobic bacteria takes over. They start breaking things down and creating acids. Then, another group of bacteria moves in to eat those acids. And this last group? They're the ones that produce a ton of methane gas. This whole process eventually slows down, but it can keep going for 50 years or even longer.
And all that methane gas? That is a huge deal. Globally, landfills account for something like 20% of all methane we humans put into the atmosphere. And you've probably heard this, but methane is a seriously potent greenhouse gas, way more powerful than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. So managing this gas isn't just a landfill issue, it's a major climate issue.
And this is exactly why all that engineering we talked about, the liners, the caps, is so incredibly important. Because when these systems fail, the consequences can be absolutely devastating. A major European study, for example, found a significant increase in certain birth defects for people living near hazardous waste sites. The stakes are incredibly high.
So when you boil it all down, a landfill poses 4 major risks to the environment. You've got air pollution from gases and dust, water pollution from that leachate we talked about, soil pollution if anything escapes, and just the general disruption to the natural habitat. Modern landfill engineering is a constant battle to block every single one of these pathways.
Okay, so for most of the last century, the game plan was pretty simple. Bury our trash and try to forget about it. But that's starting to change. People are now looking at these massive landfills and asking a really interesting question. What if this isn't just a tomb for our trash? What if it's actually a treasure chest?
And that one question, is it a tomb or a treasure chest, is completely changing how we think about landfills. It shifts the whole idea from a final resting place for our garbage to maybe just a temporary holding area, a future mine packed with valuable stuff we might want to get back someday.
This new way of thinking has led to 2 very different approaches. We have the traditional dry tomb model we've been talking about, where the goal is to keep everything as dry as possible and slow down the process. But then you have this newer idea called a bioreactor landfill, which does the complete opposite. It actually adds liquid back into the waste to speed up decomposition. Why would you do that? Well, you can capture more methane for energy much faster, and the whole landfill becomes stable in just a few years instead of 50.
And this is where it starts to feel like science fiction. We're talking about landfill mining, literally excavating old dumps to pull out valuable metals. There are already waste-to-energy plants that capture that methane gas and use it to generate electricity for our homes. And now we have smart landfills using drones, AI, and all sorts of sensors to monitor everything in real time. It's getting seriously high-tech. So where does this all leave us? As we all get better at reducing, reusing, and recycling, the very idea of a landfill is at a crossroads. Is the landfill of the future going to be a high-tech power plant, a resource mine for the next generation? Or will we get so good at managing our waste that they just become obsolete, a relic of a less efficient time? That is the big question we're all facing.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more How Meets History.